Early access for Avowed started a few days ago, and ever since I've been putting in like 10 hours a day, and if I had to put the game into one word, unfortunately that word is lackluster. Avowed is a fun game, but it's nothing to write home about. Let me explain what I mean. If Avowed came out in 2010, it would have been great, but sadly it did not come out in 2010, it came out in 2025, which is kind of a shock. A lot of the game feels very rushed and half-cooked. You can walk up to NPCs and guards and attack them and they won't even respond to you. You can hit or shoot wild animals in the world and they have zero reaction. They won't even run away to the sound of gunfire, which feels like a pretty basic mechanic in a game that, again, came out in 2025. You're allowed to just pick up anything you find in the world, even if it's in someone's house or store. There is no stealing mechanic here, and I've seen the argument that the reason that you're allowed to take everything you want is because of who you are in the story and lore, which I won't spoil, and honestly, it just sounds like excuses to me. Like, oh, we couldn't be bothered to add in the crime system, so we just blamed it on the lore and the story that we were going for, so we didn't have to do it. You won't even take damage while standing on fire, and the game knows that you're standing on fire because it vibrates your controller when you do so. So again, I just can't think of why else they wouldn't include damage here outside of, well, laziness, as much as that pains me to say. Again, a lot of the stuff would have been fine like over a decade ago, maybe even later on, like 2013 maybe. I do want to make it very clear that I do not hate Avowed. I think it's a really fun game, but in a world where we have games like Skyrim or Cyberpunk or Baldur's Gate 3, especially with it being so recent, Avowed is just not good enough. Again, it's not bad by any means, it's just not good enough. It's lackluster. It's half-baked. You know when you get McDonald's fries, and by the time you're home you've got to reheat them, and they're kinda nice when you reheat them in the air fryer instead of the microwave, but they're never as nice as they were originally. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Avowed is the McDonald's fries of modern RPGs. The exploration is unfortunately not great. Again, don't get me wrong, you will find some absolutely stunning and beautiful caves to explore, but they're almost always like tied to a quest. This isn't like Skyrim where you will just stumble across locations and suddenly be exploring a random cave for 20 minutes. The water mechanic is really cool, like it's fun to swim around and see what's under the oceans and stuff, but again, unfortunately, it's lackluster. We're going to keep coming back to that. I've never found anything cool underneath all this water. It just feels like a missed opportunity to not include some cool underwater exploration here. The exploration is not terrible, it's just not great. It's much better than, say, Starfield's exploration, which, even though I do like Starfield, I will admit is pretty piss poor. Avowed does have better exploration, but it's still nothing amazing. Something that I do really appreciate about Avowed is that uniques are, well, unique. When you find a unique item, it's going to look completely different and act completely different to any other item of that kind. Let's say you find a unique sword, the sword is going to look different to all of the other swords in the game, and it's going to have a unique ability that you're not going to find on another sword. This is something that more games need to do, especially nowadays, because I'm really tired of finding quote-unquote unique gear in video games that look exactly the same as common gear that I find everywhere else in the world. And I'm very, very glad that Avowed didn't do that and they steered away from that normal, boring shit. Some of the cutscenes in this game are absolutely stunning, although the actual game, while having some gorgeous views and areas, mostly doesn't look too great. It doesn't look bad, but like nothing really took me back. I'm just not a fan of the art style that they went for here, but that's fine, it's not for everyone. And I'm not going to necessarily call it bad because, you know, again, it's subjective. Art style is subjective. I'm not a fan of it, but you might be. Again, the cutscenes look absolutely gorgeous most of the time. The combat is also really fun. Like, I genuinely think it's some of the best, if not the best, first-person melee combat I've ever experienced. Melee combat being, you know, like really fun and unique in a first-person perspective is a really difficult thing to do, but they absolutely nailed it here. The combat in Avowed is definitely, in my opinion, the best thing that the game has going for it, but unfortunately, you're going to spend more time in dialogue than you are in combat, and the dialogue is, shockingly, because this is Obsidian and they usually have really good dialogue, but the dialogue is just an absolute snooze fest. Most of the time in dialogue, and it's not all the time, but it is 99% of the time, you're going to have to listen to about 5 minutes of an NPC yapping for them to hurry up and get to the damn point, and tell you what you need to know. And it just leads to you wanting to skip the dialogue and just hurry up and get to that point, and then when it's your turn to respond to them, you're just going to want to click on whatever dialogue is going to hurry up and move the conversation forward faster. And this is something that I never ever do in games, and I just could not help myself with Avowed. You'll ask an NPC, hey, what do you need help with? And they will yap for what feels like fucking forever about their entire backstory and lore, and after about 50 lines of dialogue, they'll finally say, oh, I need you to go and get this item from this location. And you're just sitting there at your desk staring at the monitor like that is all you had to say, brother. The style of dialogue that they went for also just didn't click with me, but again, that is, that's subjective. The writing I wouldn't necessarily say is bad, you might enjoy it. There are definitely a few lines that made me laugh or whatever, but yeah, most of the time it just felt like yapping. I really can't describe it in any other way. It was just too much. And by the way, I'm the type of person that will genuinely sit there and read an entire book in one sitting, and I'm telling you that there is way too much boring dialogue in this fucking game. We have RPGs nowadays where dialogue is so great, like Baldur's Gate 3. Again, when playing that game even for the 50th time, I am so damn immersed and captured by everything going on, especially dialogue-wise. Cyberpunk has the same amazing dialogue, especially like Judy's phone call during a certain ending, which I won't spoil in case some of you haven't played it, but it genuinely made me tear up. But in Avowed, it's just so fucking boring. I really can't. I just can't. It is a struggle to care about anything anyone says, and at this point, I'm not sure if it's just because there's way too much dialogue, or just because the world doesn't immerse you enough to give a shit about it. Even if we go all the way back to Skyrim, the dialogue isn't great by any means. It's Bethesda, come on. But the world is so immersive that you actually want to listen to what most characters have to say. And I just didn't get that with Avowed, and that brings me to companions. Kai, the first companion that you will get in Avowed, is one of the worst companions I've ever had the displeasure to play with in a video game. This dude is so fucking annoying and boring and just animated so weirdly that just seeing him takes you out of the game. The other companions are cool, but they're nothing special. Again, lackluster. It keeps coming back to that word, right? You aren't going to build a relationship and become good friends with these companions like you would in other RPGs. Again, Baldur's Gate, Cyberpunk, or even Starfield or Fallout 4. These companions are just sort of there to, once again, yap about their opinions constantly until you finally get this sweet sensation of moving past the dialogue. Now, this might sound a little bit nitpicky, but it is something that genuinely irritated me a lot in Avowed, so I feel I should mention it. The navigation. Out in the world, it's absolutely fine, but the way that cities and towns are laid out, I was constantly going the wrong way or walking to a quest only to be met by like a dead end, and then I'd have to walk all the way around to get somewhere. I can't really describe it besides just saying I was constantly thinking, how the hell am I supposed to get there? And it doesn't help that I couldn't fast travel for most of my playthrough. I have no idea why, I just couldn't, it wouldn't let me, wouldn't tell me why, and I couldn't find a solution on Google. I think that this is just a bug, and I should mention that this is the only bug that I ever got about, which is great because I had been told that the game was riddled with bugs, but thankfully that was not the case for me. It was a relatively bug-free experience besides the fast travel thing. I do feel like maybe I'm being overly harsh because again, I don't hate Avowed. I did really enjoy my time with it, especially the combat. Again, I loved the combat in this game. It was absolutely great, and I hate comparing video games, but it's just, again, in a world where we have, in only the last few years, gotten some of the best RPGs ever made, Avowed just isn't really good enough. It's not bad, it is not a terrible game by any means, but I can't really sit here and recommend it when there are so many better RPGs that you could be playing. The world of Avowed is just so static. NPCs don't even walk around their towns, they're just sort of stuck in one place. Avowed has the potential to be a fantastic RPG if Obsidian are willing to give it all of the love and support that, again, games like Cyberpunk or Baldur's Gate 3 got. And I know that I keep bringing up those games, I'm sorry, but they're just good examples. Like Cyberpunk was absolutely terrible at launch, I think that we can all agree on that. Now it's one of the best RPGs I've ever played. And Avowed, I feel, could get to this point if it got the same amount of love. If they update the game a ton, add new features like NPCs having schedules, like a crime system, like NPCs actually reacting when you shoot them in the face. It could slowly become a really fantastic RPG, but right now it's just not there. Much like Cyberpunk, you can feel that there is a good game underneath the mediocreness. And look, as much as I love Obsidian as a developer, that is what Avowed is. It's lackluster and mediocre, unfortunately. It really does feel like they just scrapped things to get the game out faster, or they just didn't do things because they couldn't be bothered to do them. I'm not saying that that's what they did, but I'm telling you that that's what it feels like. Again, going back to that staticness and emptiness of the world, why aren't NPCs walking around? Why am I not getting in trouble for stabbing a guard straight in the face? It is 2025 and it feels like this newly released game is just a fun game that I'm replaying from the early 2010s, and unfortunately it's just not good enough for this day and age. Look, if you're a Game Pass subscriber, I would say absolutely it's worth playing. Like, yeah, go and download it right now and play it. It is a fun time. It's just not worth full price when you could spend that money on much better RPGs. If you asked me to recommend you an RPG at full price, Avowed would not even be in the top 10 of them. Maybe it would have been back in like 2014, maybe even 2015, but not today. Again, I don't want to compare games because I understand how irritating that is, but I sadly just cannot recommend this in a world where you could play something much better for the same price. Look, overall, I would just say wait for sale at the very least. If you've got any questions about the game, leave them in the comments and I'll try to reply to everyone as soon as I can. And of course, if you do want to stay up to date on RPG news, reviews and discussions, then please do consider subscribing. I cover it all over here. And lastly, as always, a huge, massive thank you to all of our channel members for their continued support. It means a lot, guys. But with all of that said and done, that is my unfortunate review of Avowed. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Peace.